Hello, everybody, and welcome to Charts with Dan. Still here in the bedroom closet at my mom's house. I will be here for a few more days. Thank you so much to everybody for bearing with me as I make use of my temporary studio slash domicile storage facility. So much to get to today. Obviously, the new Mutants opening up over the weekend, the first major release to hit movie theaters following Russell Crowe's Unhinged as it kind of ushered in the new era. Also looking at Tenet as it gets ready to open up this weekend, what that release might look like. But before we start, I would really be remiss to not mention the shocking passing of Chadwick Boseman over the weekend. And anytime somebody that is familiar, whether that's a famous person, whether that is someone you know in your life, in your personal life, passes away, it's always a bit of a shock to the system. But to get that news over the weekend was really, I mean, the only word that I can keep saying in my mind and that I keep turning over is stunning. And we're now finding out so much about what turned out to be the last years of Chadwick Boseman's life, which really encompassed his rise to superstardom and the courage and the tenacity and the bravery and grace that he faced in his last years while hiding from the world this condition that he was fighting. And, you know, cancer is an insidious thing, and it has taken so many people away. And first and foremost, you know, to Chadwick Boseman's friends, to his family, and then also by extension to his fans around the world, this has been such a massive loss. And one of the things that, you know, I've thought about is how much work was still ahead of him. I have to be honest, I was mostly familiar with his work on screen from his work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Black Panther, where he became an icon, not just inside the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but to so many people in the United States and around the world. And one of the things that I thought was so touching when Black Panther was released was seeing these reactions from people, friends of mine, people in the critical community, people just out in the world who, by seeing a black superhero on screen, by seeing Wakanda brought to life on screen and what that movie had to say on the stage that it had to say it, seeing how it touched so many people who for the first time felt seen and felt like they had a piece of this franchise and that they had a piece of this universe. And I am someone who sees myself on screen a lot, and I take for granted what that feeling is. And so to see what Chadwick Boseman meant to so many people, and then the suddenness with which he's taken away, is very difficult to deal with and really to process. But I really think that the one thing that is always when we talk about, and this has been a rough year as far as losing people in the Hollywood community and really just by extension everywhere around the world. 2020 has just been a rough year. Like 2020 just, it sucks. It does. This year sucks. But the thing that I always go back to as any sort of solace or comfort is looking at the work that is left behind. And with Chadwick Boseman, as I was saying, I didn't see a lot of his other films, Marshall or 42 or 21 Bridges or Get On Up, which was really kind of a star-making turn for him, because the word was always that, you know, the movies were fine, but he was great. And so they were always on my list of things to see later or to do later. And it turns out that, you know, I missed that work at a time, you know, when he was here, when he was present. And so many people, when we look at the streaming charts in a little bit, we're going to see how many people have been visiting his work or revisiting his work. But it really is a shocking death and a shocking turn of events and very sad. But I really do truly believe that perhaps the gift that Chadwick Boseman is going to leave everyone is what we're going to learn in the days and the weeks and the months to come, because not everyone, it's just hard to imagine being able to face the end with such grace and clarity and really a desire to be recognized for your work and for what you do and not for what you have or for what you're fighting. and the fact that he did that and really gave this gift of his performances to so many people and on such a public stage while fighting something so privately, is really just the picture of heroism. I mean, we knew he played a superhero, but in many ways, I think that Chadwick Boseman was so heroic in his own life in ways that we're just now beginning to find out. So, a tough loss to take, and certainly a stunning one and a tragic one. But I really do think that what we're going to find out in the next little bit about Chadwick Boseman is just going to cement the legacy that he leaves behind, which was already impressive. So as we turn now from that, we go to the big box office story of the weekend, which is the resumption, really in full, of the domestic box office with the release of the New Mutants. And believe it or not, folks, it actually happened. The New Mutants was released. It came out in theaters. Tickets were sold. People saw it. Reviews came out, etc. So when we look at the weekend for the New Mutants, right now we're looking at the estimated numbers. I'm filming this a little early for a couple of reasons. Number one, I am on Central Time instead of Pacific Time today. And number two, I need to get this shot and edited and uploaded and everything else a little bit earlier today because I have a screening of Tenet. The early access public screenings start tonight, and I'm going to be watching that to bring you my review of that later on tonight. So wanted to get this up a little bit earlier. So these are the estimated numbers. New Mutants comes in with an estimated $7 million at number one. Easily the biggest weekend for any movie since theaters have started reopening, indoor theaters at least. Then we have Unhinged, which actually added theaters but dropped as far as money goes. They're in second place. I think perhaps the hopes of Solstice that this film would play and grow over a course of many weeks not bearing out so far, but we'll see what the future has in store. Then at number 3, Bill and Ted Face the Music, which had a hybrid premium video on demand and theatrical release, reports in at number 3 with just over $1 million. I saw a lot of people that went to the drive-in to see that film, and the drive-in actually is behind a lot of these grosses here domestically. Then the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, playing only in Canada this past weekend, but still enough to be at number 4. And then Fox Searchlight, The Personal History of David Copperfield, comes in with just over $500,000. That was a delayed release from earlier this year. Now, it should be noted that Tenet did open in Canada this past weekend in some theaters, but they are holding back that number to roll into the domestic number for next week. People have always asked how are the Canada numbers reported? Canadian numbers are generally folded into the domestic box office. So the numbers that you see here, me talking about when I say domestic box office. So that number is going to be rolled into what Tenet looks like next week, and we'll talk about the prospects for Tenet in just a minute. But really, I feel like we have to bring a little bit of closure to something, which is that for months now, literally 7-8 months, we've been doing the countdown to New Mutants. And even last week, I was not fully convinced that the movie was going to come out. But as it turns out, the movie was released. And so I feel like this is just for a little closure that we turn the countdown to New Mutants into the countdown to New Mutants, because it actually happened. And look at that, folks. We are at -3 days. That's right. The movie came out 3 days ago. So the countdown ends in negative numbers because it actually happened. Over 800, almost 900 days from its original release date, over 550 days from its second release date, over a year from its third release date, 150 days from its fourth release date. The countdown is in negative numbers. It is officially over. And what a countdown it was. We did the countdown last year, counting down to Cats, and this was certainly a much different kind of countdown. What can I do next? Although I like the suggestion of the Count Dune. I think perhaps next week we'll have to start the Count Dune, because that's something like Cats that I don't really know anything about. So perhaps the Count Dune will also double as me educating myself a little bit into the world of Dune. We're going to be getting a trailer here very soon, so perhaps that's where we'll go. Now, I mentioned domestically that New Mutants did some money, but there's also the resumption of box office worldwide, and Tenet actually opened in a lot of markets worldwide. They thought that it was heading toward about a $40 million opening weekend in several worldwide markets, but it actually was closer to $53 million. And as a matter of fact, now these are not not official numbers. The 2020 numbers, the worldwide numbers, have not been updated for a lot of these releases. These are estimates based on what we're seeing, but based on where we were when everything shut down earlier in the year, Tenet now takes the number 10 spot at the worldwide box office with $53 million, knocking off Tanhaji the Unsung Warrior. So it's already on the books on the worldwide top 10. And then the 800, which is now turning into China's first bona fide blockbuster of the year, has now totaled over $280 million. That is enough for it to take the number 3 spot. It will soon pass Sonic the Hedgehog, although, as I mentioned, there are unreported grosses for these other films because the studios have not yet updated those grosses, at least as of taping. But we have Tenet on the top 10. We now have the 800 steaming toward that number 2 position for 2020 worldwide. And I wanted to look at, I've been doing the 2020 release schedule, and it was getting very messy with all these things crossed out and X'd out, and a lot of them like Tenet and Antebellum and Bill and Ted Face the Music, and all of these other films have been resolved. So I wanted to kind of compress that schedule we were looking at, but still keep on the ones that were supposed to have come out. But let's look at the 2020 release schedule as it was supposed to be and as it stands right now. And there's actually another change, and this one came from Disney Fox. We had A Quiet Place Part 2, which was scheduled for September 4th. That moved to next April. We had The Conjuring 3, which was scheduled for September. That moved to next June. And then a movie that I saw a trailer for before I went to see New Mutants, The Kingsman, which has already been moved a couple times, was scheduled to open on September 18th. It has been moved to next February 26th, 2021. So this really clears the path for Tenet for the entire month of September. At least domestically, there are no major releases still on the schedule. Everything has pretty much been wiped off, and the next huge release that we're looking for that could compete with Tenet is another one from Warner Brothers, which is Wonder Woman 1984, which is still scheduled for October 2nd. So if Warner Brothers' plan was for Tenet to take over the box office and have a month to itself, well, then they've got it, because there will be some other smaller films coming out, but as far as major releases, they have all moved off the schedule. And then as we look into October, Halloween Kills was supposed to come out on the 16th. That was moved to next year. We have Candyman on October 16th, Death on the Nile on October 23rd, then Black Widow on the 6th of November, No Time to Die and Soul on November 20th, and then on December 18th, Dune and West Side Story, all scheduled to open. Again, this is not complete. These are select movie releases, but I have a feeling that we're going to be marking this one up a little bit too, kind of like we did with the last one, because the fall and the winter are big unknowns at this point. We don't quite know where things are going to fall. Now, one thing that is not an unknown or won't be much longer for some folks is Tenet, which is long hyped, long built up, has so much expectation around this film. It's almost unfair how much expectation there is around this movie. But it is coming out, as I mentioned. Early access screenings start tonight. Those are open to the public. They're not critic screenings. They're just early screenings of the movie. It officially opens later this week, and it is expected to be the movie that really kicks the box office into a different gear as more people are drawn in. Unhinged was a bit of a specialty release. It drew some people out. New Mutants was never expected to be a massive draw, even in the best of times. The reviews probably did not help that film as well. But Tenet is really the one that is expected to drive curiosity, obviously with IMAX being a big driver, and the fact that it is only available in markets. If you want to go see it, if you want to go to the drive-in, right now still, you have to go to a market where indoor theaters are open. So I think that's a stupid move. I think it's really dumb, but that's the way it's going. They have not reversed that position yet. I think it sucks for people. If I were not here seeing family and things, if I were in California, I would be SOL. If you don't know what that means, look it up, because it's not currently playing at any drive-in or anywhere in California because there are no indoor theaters open. So I don't agree with this release strategy, but it is driving interest, and I wanted to take a look at just what we might be expecting from Tenet this weekend. So if you'll remember last week when we were talking about New Mutants and what we might be able to expect from the weekend box office, I took a look at a few different AMC theaters on Fandango just to look at the seating charts and see what the pre-sales were at that point in time. So I decided to revisit those same theaters for to get an idea of where at the exact same time of the week these are also screenings that are happening on opening night. So these were screenings that were on Thursday night, the first showings for New Mutant. These are also the screenings for tonight, the first showings for Tenet, just to see what we might be looking at as far as a difference in crowd size. So first, let's look at the theater I looked at last week in Dallas, the AMC North Park 15. These are the numbers for New Mutants. So when we were looking at the opening night of New Mutants, the theater had a capacity of 368. There were 43 seats booked, 153 seats blocked, with 172 seats empty. So the theater was 11.6% sold as far as seats sold, 53% full when you account for social distancing, with the AMC capacity limit reported to be 30%, although I've heard that might be adjusted in various areas. Let's look at the same theater, but when you look at how it is selling for Tenet, this is for the first showing tonight, same layout in the theater, we have 98 seats booked, 203 seats blocked, 67 seats empty. It is 26.6% sold, 81.7% full when you account for seats blocked off for social distancing. And it's coming up, if that AMC capacity limit is 30%, you're coming up right on it. And looking at this seating chart, I actually wonder when AMC set those capacity limits at 30%, it was reported to be a safety measure. Looking at how those seats are sold, I wonder if they set the capacity limit at 30% because they did the math and they realized that's how many people are going to be able to fit into this theater anyway when you add in seats blocked off for social distancing. So, maybe a little bit of a showmanship on AMC's part by saying, like, we're limiting capacity for 30%. Like, well, no, actually, it seems like that's just reality, is you can't fit more than 30% into this theater. But obviously, looking at these two numbers, you had 11.6% sold for New Mutants and 26.6% sold for Tenet. Obviously, a much larger driver of interest, over twice as many seats sold for these two films. So when you're looking at the box office, I think we could easily see that. I think it's almost assured that we're going to see that $7 million that New Mutants opened to doubled. I think you could see it tripled, because there's another theater that I looked at in Chicago, Illinois. I could not do a comparison because the seating charts weren't available, because the seats in the theater that I looked at last week were already sold out. And as a matter of fact, I've seen a few different showtimes sold out. We did not see that for New Mutants. So I think when we look ahead to Tenet and what we could see as far as market goes and box office goes, I think we're going to see probably triple at least the number that we saw for New Mutants. $20 million plus would not surprise me at all, because this is the interest driver. This has always been the movie that most interested people when it comes to returning to theaters, and I think that that's what we're going to see this upcoming weekend. Now, as I have said from the beginning, I really hope that theaters are enforcing what they need to enforce, because the last thing that moviegoers need is lax enforcement by theater chains, and lax following of those regulations by those going to the movie theaters, because all that's going to result in is losing movie theaters again completely. And nobody wants that. It's not good for business. It's not good for movie fans. But most importantly, it's not good for health. It's not good for public health, and it's not good for public safety. So please, if you're going to Tenet starting tonight, I know I sound like a broken record, but please take precautions, follow the guidelines, be safe, be careful, and if you see something that you think is hazardous, please don't be afraid to report it. I will be going tonight again. As I mentioned, I wore an N95 mask for not just others' protection, but for my protection. Please be careful and please follow the guidelines, because I do believe that there is a safe way to go to the movies. But I think that in order for that to happen, the guidelines and the restrictions have to be followed, or else we're going to find ourselves right back where we were, where there are no new movies coming out and no theaters open, and nobody wants that. So if you're going to Tenet, please, I beg of you, please be careful and be safe, and consider the safety and health of others. So let's look at what people are watching on streaming, and we'll start, as always, with the top 10 movies on Amazon. And Bill and Ted Face the Music is number one on Amazon. It's a $1 million grosser at the box office. Obviously, we don't know what these numbers are, but the fact that it's number one on a couple of different PVOD platforms, and the fact that it did well at the box office, I think means that Orion may be happy with the numbers that they're seeing, at least so far. We may never know exactly what those numbers are, but it does seem like there was interest in Bill and Ted Face the Music, and that this hybrid release strategy seems to have been successful, considering the fact that it did $1 million in box office grosses and is selling on premium video on demand. At number two is Black Panther. Obviously, a huge surge in interest in Chadwick Boseman and his life and his career. Black Panther was also run on ABC last night, commercial free, along with a tribute to Chadwick Boseman. Reportedly, that drew in 6 million viewers, the top rated show of the night, easily, perhaps the top rated show of the week. At number 3 is a Megan Fox movie called Rogue, which I have not seen, but it is not an X-Men film. Then at number 4, some holdovers. We have The King of Staten Island, followed by Red 2, Trolls World Tour, and The Silencing. Then there at number 8, 21 Bridges, another film starring Chadwick Boseman. At number 9, Game Night, and at number 10, John Wick Chapter 3. Those are both holdovers from last week. Let's look at what people are buying and renting over on iTunes, and we see a couple of trends carrying over from what we see over on Amazon. At number 1 is Bill and Ted Face the Music. At number 2 is a triple feature that was packaged of the 3 films together. So we don't know what's rental and what's purchase, but it looks like we've got a good mix of both here on iTunes. So Bill and Ted taking the number 1 and the number 2 spot on the iTunes charts. Then at number 3, 42, The Story of Jackie Robinson, starring Chadwick Boseman. Again, so much interest in his work and in his career. The King of Staten Island returns at number 4. Then at number 5, Black Panther, as we saw over on Amazon. At number 6 is The Silencing. Marshall, another Chadwick Boseman film where he plays Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, is there at number 7. Then a new entry there at number 8, Hard Kill, followed by David Ayer's The Tax Collector, and Fatima there at number 10. And then as we turn over to Netflix, let's look at what's number 1 over there. And this is an interesting case. At number 1 right now is a movie that came out in 2013. It stars Bruce Willis, John Cusack, and Vanessa Hudgens, called The Frozen Ground. Like I said, it came out about 7 years ago. It had a limited theatrical release, but essentially went straight to DVD. So kind of not a very notable film when it was released, but it was a new entry to Netflix. It just hit Netflix, and from what I could see, from what I could find through social media, etc., this just seems like a word of mouth thing where it's a new movie that popped up on Netflix. People watched it and they liked it. They recommended it, and it is now at number 1. That is not a Netflix original. That's not even a new movie in the sense that it was made 7 years ago, but it is a new entry on Netflix, and it has gotten its way to the number 1 spot. At number 2 is Project Power, still holding strong in its 3rd week. Then we have Drunk Parents and One Bedroom, which are holdovers from last week. The Sleepover, Santana at number 6, Mr. Peabody and Sherman at number 7. Then All Together Now and The Secret Life of Pets 2, 2 new entries there at number 8 and number 9. And then The Lost Husband at number 10. So those are the numbers that I have for this week. Usually, like I said, I wait till some of the more final numbers come in, but I want to get this out, and I want to give this some space between this video and my review of Tenet, which comes out tonight. I'm seeing it. I will get a review out as soon as I can. It'll probably be a little late tonight, but hopefully not too late. It will be a spoiler-free review, so I will not be spoiling anything in this review. Perhaps, and it sounds like there is enough to talk about from the very little that I've heard. I've tried to stay away from as much information as I could, but perhaps there will be enough for me to do a spoiler review that I can upload this weekend. But as for right now, Tenet, my spoiler-free review will be coming out tonight. And by the way, if you didn't see my other reviews, I have one up now for the new Mutants. I have one up for Bill and Ted Face the Music, and I also have one up for Unhinged, the latest films that have been released. Those are going to scroll up at the top of the screen on the little cards that you can click if you missed any of those. And if you want to see what else I'm doing, you can check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/Dan Murrell. I'm going to be announcing some new additions to the tiers very soon, and I'd love to have you come and join the community. We've had such a great time. We just wrapped up another movie club, monthly movie club, and it was 3 films from Christopher Nolan. We did Inception, Interstellar, and The Prestige. Had a great discussion, some great questions, and it's been so much fun. So if you want to join me over on Patreon, I'd love to have you there. Also, don't forget to find me on Instagram and Twitter at MurrellDan. You can find me there. And of course, thank you for watching me here. I really appreciate your time. And like I said, if you're going to the movies, please be safe. And I will see you here tonight with my review of Tenet. Thanks for watching.